And yesterday, in an answer to Senator Kennedy, you said, the FBI is not in possession of any credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself. So according to your testimony yesterday and in this committee, according to the evidence the FBI has, the number of names on the list are zero.
No,
zero.
The index has been released, and the number of people involved in that trafficking operation were charged in 2008.
Other than Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, your testimony in the Senate and here is that according to the evidence you have, the number of other names is zero.
That were charged based on credible evidence.
Well, who are the other names? Give me the other names that weren't charged.
We are not releasing the names of anyone because the Department of Justice never does that of anyone that didn't have any credible information to attack them.
With a stack of documents in hand, Moskowitz stood up and hit Kash Patel with a devastating question that exposed his shocking ignorance of the very Constitution he swore to defend. The room went dead silent. The man who once boasted he would be the strongest defender of due process in FBI history was suddenly told point blank that he hadn't even read the most basic protection in the Bill of Rights. And instead of owning it, Patel deflected and hid behind technicalities. What came next was even worse. And it raises serious questions about whether the Bureau under Patel is still in the business of defending the Constitution or simply protecting power.
It's disgusting. There are lots of names, lots of co-conspirators, and they're trafficking girls all across the world. I mean, it's exactly as people thought it was. It's that, and more, unfortunately.
What you're about to see next will make that question even more disturbing.
I want to take your attention back a second, okay? Breaking news. Kash Patel is nominated to be the FBI director. Dan Bongino is nominated to be the number 2 at the FBI. MAGA celebrates, rejoices, bells are ringing out. The team, Patel, Bongino, that sought out every podcast microphone to talk about the Epstein list. The names are finally going to get released. It begins. They produce white binders. Phase 1 with the podcasters. This is not actually one of them, of course. I made this. Your name's on it, right? And the names are going to come out. Pam Bondi says the list is on her desk. Then a memo comes out all of a sudden and says, there's no list. Oh, no phase 2. Phase 2 binders never happen. You said the conspiracy theories around Epstein just aren't true. They never have been.
That timeline isn't commentary, it's public record. And when you lay it out date by date, Director Patel's cold zero names answer stops looking like a simple legal fact and starts looking like the final chapter of a promise that collapsed in slow motion. Before taking office, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino built massive audiences by weaponizing the Epstein scandal. They turned it into a rallying cry, promising a full accounting of the client list, flight logs, and the powerful men who allegedly escaped justice for years. Once confirmed, the administration cashed in fast. In late February 2025, Attorney General Pam Bondi told Fox News the Epstein client list was sitting on her desk.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files.
Days later, conservative influencers were handed white binders stamped The Epstein Files, Phase 1, Inside the West Wing, staged as a historic moment of transparency. By July 2025, a joint DOJ-FBI memo declared there was no incriminating client list, no credible evidence of blackmail, and no need for further disclosure. The very promise Patel, Bondi, and Bongino had built their reputations on was quietly buried. Internal fallout was reportedly ugly, with Bongino furious over the lack of transparency. Senate Democrats, led by Dick Durbin, sent sharp oversight letters demanding answers. Even as recently as February 2026, watchdogs filed complaints alleging the DOJ improperly narrowed releases and shielded officials' own communications, including Patel's,
we've reviewed all the information and the American public is going to get as much as we can release?
This is the clearest evidence yet of Kash Patel's blatant hypocrisy. When he and his allies were outside the system, they treated Epstein's network as proof of a protected elite class. Now that he holds the most powerful law enforcement position in the country, the same scandal has been reduced to a narrow technicality, 0 additional names with credible evidence. This double standard is dangerous. Against political opponents, the FBI under Patel shows no hesitation. But in one of the most horrific sex trafficking cases in modern history, backed by court documents, flight logs, and victim testimonies pointing to a far wider circle, they suddenly adopt the strictest, most cautious stance. Victims don't need dry legal thresholds. They need truth and justice. This is where the story stops being about numbers on a page and starts being about a signature the president himself calls fake.
Let me move forward. The president you've seen the picture of the woman's body with the writing and the president's signature. The president says that's not his. Okay? President says it's not his. The Republican colleagues say it's not his. The administration say it's not his. Will you be opening up an investigation into the Epstein estate for putting out a fake document with the president's signature linking him to the world's largest pedophile ring? Will you be opening that investigation into that?
On what basis?
On what basis? They literally put out a fake document, according to the president, with a fake signature. It's a forgery of the president of the United States signature. That's the basis.
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay, I look forward to that investigation. Am I over? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your diligence.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Sure, I'll do it. 4 words delivered with almost casual indifference might be the single most revealing moment in this entire hearing. Because in that instant, Kash Patel showed exactly who he's become. The man who once positioned himself as the fearless outsider ready to burn down the deep state now sits at the very center of power. And when handed a direct request to investigate a potential forgery tied to the President of the United States, his response wasn't urgency. It was a shrug dressed up as cooperation. Let's be precise about what Moskowitz actually asked for. He wasn't demanding Patel speculate about guilt. He was asking him to investigate a potential federal crime, forgery of a sitting president's own signature, on a document tying him to Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday book, a document the president himself, his own Republican colleagues, and his own administration all publicly call fake. That's not a partisan gotcha question. That's an open and shut predicate for exactly the kind of inquiry Patel's bureau is legally obligated to pursue. And Patel's first instinct wasn't to say yes. It was to ask on what basis, as if the forgery of a sitting president's signature, tied to the most notorious trafficking case in a generation, somehow needed further justification before it warranted a look. Here's the document he was stalling on. In July 2025, the Wall Street Journal reported that Epstein's associates had compiled a scrapbook for his 50th birthday. And inside it sat a lewd letter bearing Trump's name, framed by a hand-drawn outline of a woman's body, closing with a line about sharing a wonderful secret. Trump denied it instantly, called the story fake, and sued the Journal for at least $20 billion. But watch how the denial evolved. First, it wasn't his language. Then it wasn't his drawing. Then, according to Rolling Stone, Trump floated the idea that someone else may have forged his signature entirely. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt even said the administration would support a forensic handwriting analysis to settle it once and for all. That analysis effectively already happened, just not from the White House. Independent comparisons by the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, cross-referencing decades of Trump's personal correspondence, found the disputed signature strikingly consistent with his handwriting from that era.
If there are forgeries or forgers out there, I think we should investigate it. And in fact, this document is 22 years old. So you're telling me someone 22 years ago went back to the future and forged his signature when he was a Democrat.
CNN's own review turned up matching examples, including a 1,996 donation letter and a 1,999 condolence note carrying the same distinctive strokes. None of that settles the matter beyond all doubt. but it does mean the forgery defense Patel was just asked to investigate is, at minimum, seriously contested by multiple independent newsrooms using the president's own decades-old handwriting as the benchmark. And that's exactly why On What Basis is such a damning answer. This is a director who has spent the last year building an entire public narrative around aggressively chasing document fraud, leaks, and conspiracies. Yet the one moment a member of Congress hands him a direct, specific, evidence-backed request tied to the most powerful man in the country, his first instinct isn't curiosity, it's resistance. Only when Moskowitz spelled it out in blunt, unmistakable terms did Patel offer that hurried, almost dismissive, "Sure, I'll do it," less a commitment than a placeholder, the kind of promise politicians toss out when the clock is already running down and they're counting on the follow-up never coming. Moskowitz seemed to sense it too, closing with a pointed, "I look forward to that investigation," as his time expired, a line that reads less like courtesy and more like a marker being laid down for later. And here's the thing. There's already a pattern of exactly what happens after markers like that get laid down. Reporting from Bloomberg Law and multiple outlets covering turnover inside the Bureau's leadership has documented a recurring dynamic under Patel. Uncomfortable questions get a verbal concession in the hearing room, and then quietly vanish the moment the cameras stop rolling. 3 career FBI agents have already filed suit alleging retaliation. A 27-year veteran was reportedly pushed out over scrutiny that had nothing to do with his actual conduct. No follow-up, no timeline, no public update since the gavel dropped on this hearing. If history is any indicator, this investigation risks becoming one more promise that ages quietly into nothing.
Convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell says she will testify openly to lawmakers about her longtime associate Jeffrey Epstein if President Trump grants her clemency. Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year sentence. She testified virtually today to the House Oversight Committee, pleading the Fifth, refusing to answer questions, something committee chairman James Comer called, quote, very disappointing. Her appearance and bargain for clemency comes as lawmakers were today allowed to review an unredacted version of the Epstein files.
They saw the names of at least 6 individuals, 6 men, names who that were redacted, that they expressed some concern about, including one that they indicated could be high up in a foreign government. So obviously we're expecting to hear from the Attorney General later this week before the House Judiciary Committee. They say they intend to ask the Attorney General why some of those names were redacted. But that is something that we have heard from several lawmakers who have had an opportunity to view these unredacted documents, why it appears that some names were redacted in the case of the release of these files. So obviously more to come, but certainly many revelations coming on this first day after lawmakers having that opportunity to view them.
And how are members of Congress reacting to Ghislaine Maxwell's appearance today and her request for clemency in exchange for testimony?
Well, it was expected, although the chair of the committee, James Comer, expressed disappointment that Ghislaine Maxwell did invoke the Fifth Amendment. Obviously, many lawmakers were prepared to ask her questions and certainly see her as a central figure in terms of Jeffrey Epstein and, his sex trafficking ring. So there were a lot of questions that lawmakers wanted to get at, but were unable to since she invoked the Fifth. So for that reason, obviously, this was a very short deposition. It was a virtual deposition. And some lawmakers, too, expressing concern about this request for clemency. Both Chair Comer said he did not believe that Ghislaine Maxwell should have any type of immunity, especially after hearing from some survivors who requested that. And also, many Democrats as well felt that this was really just an opportunity for Maxwell and her attorney to try to plead their case for clemency when, they feel this should have been an opportunity to get at the facts of the case.
Compare all of this to the fire Patel once breathed when he had zero power. Back then, every podcast appearance was a declaration of war on elite impunity. Every interview framed Epstein as the ultimate proof of a two-tiered justice system, one set of rules for the connected, another for everyone else. He didn't just promise transparency, he promised reckoning. The names, the flights, the island visits, the enablers, all finally dragged into daylight. Now that he actually controls the machinery capable of delivering that reckoning, it's been reduced to the narrowest possible legal interpretation, 0 additional names, and a forgery investigation offered only after he was cornered with no room left to dodge. This transformation isn't unique to Patel, and that's almost the scarier part. It's a recurring Washington story. Outsiders arrive, promising to drain the swamp and expose corruption. Once inside, they discover the swamp has excellent lawyers, powerful friends, and the ability to make life very difficult for anyone who actually follows through. The rhetoric stays fiery in public. The action goes cautious and narrow behind closed doors. What makes Patel's version so striking is the speed of it. The same man who once demanded the full client list now presides over an FBI that has effectively declared the list doesn't meaningfully exist. The same man who once railed against powerful men escaping justice now offers a tepid, hedge your bets sure when asked to investigate whether a document links the sitting president to Epstein. Put all 3 moments from this hearing side by side, and a single, uncomfortable pattern comes into focus. 0 additional names. Despite years of promises, there would be many. A collapsed binder rollout that even his own deputy reportedly fought over internally, and a forgery investigation offered not with urgency, but with a question about jurisdiction. Any one of these, on its own, might be explained away as caution or process or legal precision. Together, they form something much harder to defend. The damage runs deeper than one hearing. It betrays the victims first, many of whom have spent years fighting for recognition that they weren't ensnared by one man, but by a system of enablers that court documents, flight logs, and their own testimony have repeatedly pointed toward. When the director of the FBI declares there's no credible evidence of others involved, he isn't just stating a legal threshold. He's telling every survivor their experience only counts if it fits a convenient narrative. It corrodes institutional trust, second, because an agency that shows no hesitation chasing political opponents, but suddenly discovers the virtues of narrow legalism the moment the powerful are at risk, invites an obvious question. What else is being handled this carefully? The Epstein files were never just about one dead man and his crimes. They were always a test of whether America's institutions can still confront power when it's inconvenient to do so. So far, under Kash Patel, that test is being failed in real time, not necessarily because of what he's found, but because of what he seems unwilling to aggressively pursue. The American people were promised the truth. What they're getting, hearing after hearing, is a director who says yes on camera and delivers 0 everywhere else. Whether this pattern is institutional incompetence or something closer to protection is exactly the question Congress and now you are left holding. Drop your read on it in the comments below. And stay tuned, because if the Democracy Defenders Fund complaint from earlier this year is any indication, this file is far from closed.